Alright, just wanted to touch on a few quick tips on installing an Ultrabell. What this is just an aftermarket bell housing that's SFI certified and much stronger. But when installing one, what I like to do is test fit them and make sure you have plenty of clearance all the way around. I leave it a little bit big. It's kind of hard to see, but I've probably got about 100 thousandths right there at the tight spot, just to make sure you're not going to have any rocking issues or seating issues and everything's going to be square. So I always test fit it, mark out my areas, just make sure you have plenty of clearance everywhere. But the next thing is, when installing these bolts, you have the bolts, the washers, and in between here you have an O-ring. Well, I like to install all my bolts, all my washers, all my O-rings. But before I do that, I just put a little bit of WD-40 on the bolt shank and then a little bit on the O-ring. And why I do that is these bolts fit really tight to the bore of the Ultrabell. So the bolts will actually kind of gag up if you're not careful there, if you don't put oil on them. So what it does is help get a more accurate torque and make sure the bolts aren't actually getting caught in the Ultrabell. So I think that's really important to do. Without doing that, you're going to get inaccurate torque, and you could risk kind of almost cross-threading a bolt because it's binding in the Ultrabell and you're thinking it's tightening in the case. But just some quick tips there. Definitely put a little bit of lubrication on the bolts. Make sure you get all your bolts, your washers, and your O-rings installed before putting the Ultrabell up there. And then I always run everything in by hand, just in a star pattern, and then go ahead and torque them from there. But before you get to that point, always test fit and make sure you have plenty of clearance. This is about the minimum clearance that I would run, and I'd say it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 80 thousandths. Could be as much as 100, but you don't have to have that much, but just like to leave plenty of room, because it's really important that Ultrabell is square to the front of that pump, because that's what's going to keep your bell housing lined up. You're using that pump surface, that flat edge, to make sure this is squared up.